Hey, good evening and welcome to chapter 27 of The Living Marriage. In actuality, if you look at the book, this is really lesson 8, um, section 4. It calls it 3 because the first part was an introduction. It's called Fulfilling Needs. This section has been a referendum on Shalom Bayis outside of the bedroom, even though most of the book is dedicated to the bedroom and its role in a successful marriage. Here we're talking about things outside the bedroom, which could get in the way of shalom bayis. This last part is called fulfilling needs. Um, his introduction, he says, every person has real physical and emotional needs. True shalom bayis requires that the needs of both partners are satisfied. One of the most basic ingredients of successful marriage is the couple's ability to appreciate and respect each other's needs, and generally speaking, this is well within their ability. This is easily understood when we remember that Hashem himself is a shadchan who joins the couples, and it isn't possible he would pair two people who are not able to satisfy each other's needs. Now, the author says, well, this is well within their ability. I mean, no, it's not. No, I don't agree. Some couples really struggle. I know I have a personal, a couple I know personally. Uh, Everything was great on paper. I mean, in my Jewish community, the girl was a great girl. Really was machshav Torah and balas chesed and wanted to do everything to help the husband. A really helpful person. And there was the chassan. One of the top guys in his yeshiva, serious masmid, a nice guy, very nice guy, a lot of friends. And everyone thought the marriage would be amazing, but you know, they got married, and soon thereafter it was discovered the wife was not herself, and the wife has never really been herself, um, never was herself the entire marriage, like a different person. And I believe early in the marriage, they said the wife told other people that even though her husband externally is a great person, but this is really in the bedroom, but he doesn't know how to show love to her. He can't show love to his wife, and you know whether it means by saying that he loves her or showing that in the bedroom. He wasn't able to do that. And because of that, because it's such the primal need of a wife to be loved by her husband, and the husband should show that in the bedroom, and this husband was not able to do it, or maybe wasn't willing to do it. I don't know. I don't know the situation precisely. You'll never know what's behind closed doors. But the woman said this herself, immediately after they got married, and the woman is not herself for the entire duration of the marriage. They're still married. It's a very sad story, but the truth is that like I said before, we don't marry our zivug. We marry who Hashem wants us to marry. Some marriages are meant to be for good to go for divorce. Sometimes divorce is an option. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. We don't know why Hashem sets up two people with each other. It doesn't mean that you have to stay married to that person. We try to because it's usually not a smart idea to get divorced, especially if you have children. Just logically for for the well-being of both of you for the rest of your lives. But Hashem does make marriages that are not perfect, and um, that's what I mentioned before. That you don't meet your zivug. It's like Kriyas Yamsuf. Kriyas Yamsuf happened one time. We don't think every time a person gets married, Kriyas Yamsuf again. Kriyas Yamsuf was once, in eternity. It'll never happen again. Kriyas Yamsuf. So to assume that every zivug is it's a perfect couple living happily ever after is a big mistake. Um, and not only, and sometimes not even their ability. I'm not sure this husband has the ability to show love to a woman. It's possible. People are like that. Some people, people on the outside are very different than what they are behind closed doors. You never know what a person's like. The only people that know a little bit what they're like are people that write the book, like this person who obviously counsels a lot of couples. Um, but even those types of people, it's just based on the hearsay, what the husband and wife tell them. They don't always give them the full picture because they're embarrassed, or sometimes the spouse doesn't even know what they really want or what they're missing, and they'll blame it on one thing. They really think it's one thing, but it's really not that thing. It's something else. And the person, the marriage counselor, is only left with certain details, or it's presented in a certain way. So again, this is my opinion. I'm not a marriage counselor. I don't have too much experience. I have my own marriage. I have, some marriages that I have a little more knowledge of. But besides that, I'm not a marriage counselor. I don't know, but I can tell you my opinion. And this is my opinion. That's why I'm doing this safer over here. My opinion of what marriage is about. So some couples are just not meant to be together. I mean, you see that a lot of times. Young couples get married, and they say it's a mekaktos. They misled them. People like we learned. He said in the previous chapter there was one person who got married. He thought he was misled because his wife lied. And he was a man of truth. So it's not always so simple. A lot of people get married young and they didn't see the red flags. You have to look out for the red flags, and he didn't see the red flag, or she didn't see the red flag, and turns out they got married. The correct thing sometimes to do is to go for a divorce because they're just not meant to be with each other, and it's not going to be a successful union. So sometimes you can work through things, right? But sometimes, inevitably it's not. Now he talks about a couple of different examples of needs that are not met and what you should do to fix that problem. He has a story, the story of the chocolate cake. A frustrated young couple once approached me with strong accusations. The husband entered first and claimed that his new wife had no interest in his desires. She was only interested in mimicking what her mother did. And if he didn't like it, that wasn't her problem. The wife entered next, explaining that her husband was completely ungrateful for everything that she does for him. She gave her soul, tried to make him happy. He had no appreciation. Even when I make him the best things in the world that everyone loves, she said, it's never enough. I've never met such a self-centered person in my life. I called the husband back after his wife said that. I asked him, could you please give me an example of how she doesn't care about what you want? Of course, he said. We've been married for 2 years, and every Shabbos, she makes the same chocolate cake they make in our home, which they think has the taste of Gan Eden. But I personally hate it. She never once asked me what type of cake I enjoy. Why do I need to suffer every Shabbos? Because she doesn't care what I like. The husband left, and his wife entered. Could you please give me an example of how your husband doesn't appreciate what you do for him? Sure, the young lady replied. There's no end to the number of examples I can give you, but I'll choose just one. When my husband came to my house before we got married, my mother would always make him a special chocolate cake that's been passed down in our family for generations. He couldn't stop talking about how much he loved her cake, how unique it was. Ever since we got married, I make the exact same cake for him every Shabbos, and he never once said thank you or even gave me one compliment. I called them both together, told them the story of the cake, and looked at their bewildered expressions. I asked the husband how many times he asked his wife for a different cake. He responded, he doesn't like talking about cakes. Being picky about cakes is below his dignity. I thought to myself, Shotgun said, the author said to himself, divorcing your wife isn't below your dignity, but talking about cake is? I told him that even if explaining which cake he preferred isn't so dignified, perhaps he could, in any case, do me a personal favor and simply ask his wife if she would consider making him a cake that he likes. Upon hearing her husband's request for cream cakes, the woman burst out in tears. Why didn't you tell me? I'd make you 1,000 cream puffs every Shabbos if that would make you happy, but I thought you liked chocolate cake. Okay, so this is obviously a couple with very poor communication. Now, I imagine this does happen a lot. Probably more in the Haredi sector where, you know, people don't communicate well. There's lack of communication. That's what he goes on. Communication is all right to ask. You have to communicate. Obviously, you have to communicate. But the author, when he heard this story about the husband who wouldn't mention to his wife, there was a number of problems the husband did over there. First of all, when he came to his mother-in-law's house, he didn't like the cake, but he went out of his way to compliment it and to say amazing things about it. If you don't like something, don't say anything. You don't have to lie and make up things, right? If my wife makes a food I don't like, I don't say anything. I don't say it's bad. I don't say anything. Right? If she makes something I like, I say this is really good. But you have to be truthful. That's really important. If anyone makes something I don't like, I'm not going to say I like it. I'm not going to lie. The story of a gadol or something like that. I'm not going to say which gadol. But he apparently during his lifetime, I don't know if he was married before he was married, or his wife wasn't there, or maybe she passed away. He had someone who was making food for him, and he hated the food. Like, people tasted the food; it was terrible, and he had double portions of it. And they asked him, "Why are you eating so?" He even became overweight because of it. Why are you eating it? He said, "Because I think other people would say to this woman that she doesn't make good foods. I want to make her feel good. So this is the reason that you're causing yourself so much trouble and pain and becoming overweight to eat double portion of food that tastes terrible." I'm like, man, no. You have to worry about yourself. You have to care about yourself. Listen, it's okay. Now, listen, I'll tell you a personal story. My wife made something for Shabbos a couple weeks ago, and you know, she has a lot of things that she makes that I like, and I tell her I like them. But she made something new, and she had made this thing, when she was single, and her whole family loved it. It sounded like the story over. Her whole family loved it. They rave about it. I tasted it. I'm like, you know, it was not enough. It was like peanut butter and chocolate together. I said not enough chocolate. And she was very hurt. And I said, listen, the thought that you made it for me, it counts. But she was very hurt because even though you're supposed to tell the truth, it's better to be silent sometimes. And you know, right when she makes it, that's a problem. I said it right when she made it. If I would have waited, until after Shabbos, had one or two, and after Shabbos she saw that I'm not eating it, and then say, listen, it's not exactly my taste. You make a lot of great stuff. I don't think she would be upset. But it wasn't terrible. I communicated. She saw I wasn't eating it. I said, I don't like it right away. She was hurt a little bit, but it was temporary. I apologized, and we moved on. And there wasn't a lack of shalom bias from that going on. This chocolate cake destroyed this guy's marriage to the point that he's going to a marriage counselor, right? And the marriage counselor asked him, what's the first thing that bothers you? Immediately he goes to the chocolate cake, right? Why didn't you communicate to her? Because it's below my dignity. He says, this is what his expression was. Being picky about cakes is below his dignity. Now, the author says, wait a second, you're waiting to get a divorce? That's not below your dignity, but be picky about cakes is below your dignity. But there's even a bigger problem over here. The bigger problem is this guy's not even in touch with himself. He's ready to go and end this marriage over a chocolate cake that he doesn't like because his wife doesn't make a good cake that he likes on Shabbos. It was his own fault. He's not communicating. Not only did he praise the mother-in-law excessively and be not truthful over there, he let his wife. He didn't communicate to his wife. But even worse than that is that he doesn't know how much cakes means to him. He's unwilling to admit to himself, you know what? Cake on Shabbos is important to me. Shabbos is a day I want to have good food. I want to have something I enjoy. And he's not in touch with himself to say, listen, I enjoy good cake. And that wasn't resolved. That's not the way he resolved it. He said, do me a favor, and tell her, communicate. That was his point, communicate. But the bigger problem is that he's not in touch with himself. And that's the biggest problem, in fulfilling needs. You got to be in touch with yourself. Most people are not in touch with themselves. And if you're not in touch with yourself, right, you don't know how much it means to you. It means a tremendous amount to him, but he wouldn't open his mouth. So when things mean a tremendous amount to you, besides the fact that communicate, before you communicate, you have to know that it bothers you and how much it bothers you. And you have to be in touch with yourself. And it's very hard because most people are not in touch with themselves. That's just the matter of the fact. Women are a lot more in touch with themselves than men. But men, whether they're in business or they're learning all the time, they're not in touch with their own needs. And you have no way you'll have things that bother you because everyone has their physical needs. Everyone has needs that they want in terms of food, in terms of the bedroom, in terms of, financially, in terms of the clothes they wear, in terms of the house, even the person who's willing to be the most minimalist, in physicality in his life, he still has things he needs because he's a human being and he's in a body and he's a physical being and he needs certain things. We all need it. We're all human beings, whether you want to starve yourself as much as possible, but you still need certain things. And to be in touch with yourself, that's the most important thing. And if you're really in touch with yourself, you realize you have a lot of things that you really like, not just foods, not just things in the bedroom. You want to buy a nice watch, you want to buy a nice car, some nice clothes, go on fancy vacations. There's a lot of things you really want. The more in touch with yourself you are, the more you realize how physical and how gashmius you are. But that's the truth. We have a body, right? We don't see our spiritual self, our metaphysical self. We know it exists. But your body is right there. You can look at it in the mirror. Your body is right there. And to say you have no physical needs, is a complete lie. You have to be in touch with yourself. And fortunately, when you're just learning Torah all day, a lot of people overlook these things. That's the biggest mistake. He goes on to talk about another big mistake. I once met an Avrech who made a very severe mistake in his understanding of chesed. When he was still a yeshiva student, he placed a lot of effort in developing his virtuous attribute of chesed. After he got married, he decided that he was going to take this special attribute into his new home and to be the most giving husband there could be. He wasn't going to bother his wife to do anything for him that wasn't completely essential. His wife would never be a maidservant. Upon using his imagination, he conjured up all types of scenarios that would define what was acceptable for his wife to do and what wasn't. For example, if there was no other choice, she could iron his clothes because he didn't know how to iron. But he never gave her clothes that were really dirty to wash. He decided they would have two separate baskets for laundry. He would do his own, and she would do her own. It didn't take long until the couple's shalom bayis began to degenerate. Even worse, he became extremely frustrated and confused as he saw his dream of being quote unquote the best husband in the world crumbling before his eyes. As a last resort, he brought his wife to me in order to try to save their marriage and clarify where he had made a wrong turn. Now, I think it's a lot deeper than just, the fact that he had to do an extra load of laundry. And this, I think, mistake over here is that everyone, it has to be outlined. Besides the fact that you have to know what you want, the woman and the man, they have to know their needs. You also have jobs in the house, and you have to know your roles. You have to know your roles. And usually it's the woman's role is to do the laundry, So when you start being a Baal Chesed and, or taking something that you really deep down inside of you, right? The Mishnah says in Ksuvos that one of the avodos, one of the malachas that a woman does is she cleans the clothes, whether it be ironing the clothes or washing the clothes. That's the job of the woman in the house. And of course, when you start doing jobs that are not your job to do, right? You have other jobs to do. A husband has a lot of other obligations. He has to provide for his wife financially. He has to provide her needs, whether in the bedroom, whether financially, whether, food, sipukaichi, making her happy. Those are, it doesn't seem like big responsibility. That's a big responsibility to take upon yourself to make your wife happy. It's not easy. Most husbands are not successful at that. To entertain your wife, that's part of being a husband, part of being a man. So those are big responsibilities. You don't have time to do the laundry. Of course, listen, if your wife is sick or there's extenuating circumstances, you should know how to do the chores of the woman. You should know how to cook. You should know how to do laundry. You should know these things to be able to fill in when it's very hectic or there's sickness in the family or someone, it's just, there's the extenuating circumstances. A real man knows how to do these things. He knows how to change diapers. He knows how to take care of the kids. He knows how to do laundry. He knows how to cook. He knows all the chores that the woman can do. The man has to be able to do also. But under normal circumstances, the woman should be doing them. And if he's, going to that domain, he's going to feel overworked. And he's going to feel it's not right. Because it really isn't right. That's not his role. Right? You have to know not only what your needs are, but you have to know your roles. Taking on someone else's role is going to cause a problem. Let's go to the last example. He talks about quirks and sensitivities. Included in the various needs of a person are quirks, unique needs or desires that found their way into the person's desires without any apparent logical explanation. A great Torah scholar once told me that every person can be expected to have several quirks. Often people's hang-ups can quickly disturb the couple's harmony. This can be avoided easily with communication, a little sensitivity, and the recognition that one's needs don't always require an explanation. Furthermore, just as one respects the sensitivities of his or her spouse, one must also respect his or her own needs, even if they can't explain why they are important. Marriage requires a person to be in touch with his or her own, and he does say it eventually, to know, this is at the end of the chapter, to know when they are living in true harmony and when they are pushing problems onto the carpet. Now, he's going to give an example. I don't know if this actually, he came in contact with a person like this. A classic example of this is a husband who arrives home after a long day and expects his wife to welcome him with her full attention. When he arrives, he finds his wife speaking on the phone with her friend and gesturing to him that she is finishing. As he paces around waiting for her, 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes pass, and eventually she finishes. Turning to her husband, she asks innocently, "What happened? You don't look so good." "Oh, the telephone? 1 second before you walked in, my friend who I haven't spoken to in half a year unexpectedly called. I finished as soon as you walked in, and I have a beautiful meal waiting for you. So what's the problem?" With no response, the husband stands silently, not knowing how to explain what the problem is. Next time this happens, the wife finishes in 5 minutes. The next time, in 2 minutes. And at that point, she's completely baffled by her husband's seemingly strange behavior. Eventually, the husband comes to his senses, puts the cards on the table, and explains, "My dear wife, although I myself can't explain why it bothers me when you're on the phone when I come home, and I know it's my own crazy hang-up, but for some reason it really bothers me. I really appreciate if you could help me by trying to avoid it in the future." Meaning, don't be on the phone when your husband comes home. Certainly, the best path would involve being mavater. This is what the author says: forgiving, when one spouse is not addressing one's needs in the ideal way. However, if a person knows that he can't be happy if his hang-up isn't fulfilled, he can and should request help from his spouse, even if he can't logically explain it. The reality that he is bothered by something is enough. It needs no explanation. Obviously, the request should be made with respect and recognition that it might be difficult for one spouse to change their natural activities for quirks that make no logical sense. Embracing Shalom Bayis requires that a couple recognize that the home isn't a court to determine who is right and who is wrong. It is a place set aside for the couple to find harmony, which requires respect and to gain sensitivity to each other's needs and hang-ups. There's no problem. It's all just another part of the pleasant challenge to nurture the deep unity that's found between them. I love how he always paints a bright picture over here. There's no problems over here. Everything's amazing. The couple's unified force. Unfortunately, the reality in marriages after a couple of years of marriage, there's very little unity in anyone's home. So most marriages, and if they think there is, like the Stapler said, look a little deeper. Look a little deeper. Most marriages with age separate. This is the reality. I mean, if you really know what the relationship between you and your wife is. Now, he says over here, this is a quirk. The reason he brings this as an example, and I will talk about different things that are quirks or weird things. There's two different types. There's a quirk that is beino lebeina, which is between you and your wife, which is something which interferes between you. So she's doing something wrong to you. It's a quirk of hers that she's doing something that hurts you. And then there's a quirk that's irrelevant to you. For example, I think my wife likes to eat pizza with olives on it. An Israeli, I don't know. Israelis like pizza with olives. To me, I would never touch an olive next to pizza. I would never touch an olive to begin with. Olives are made for olive oil. But she has a quirk. So I sit down to eat pizza. She doesn't, usually put olives on it, but I think she would order an olive slice or something like that. So she might order that. So that's a quirk of hers. It doesn't affect me in any way. I mean, usually olives don't smell that bad. You don't smell that across the table, Let her eat her olives, Or people have different quirks, that are related to them, the way they like to dress or something like that. Or the way, they conduct certain activities. But it's not affecting you at all. It shouldn't be affecting you. If it's affecting you, it's your problem, to be honest with you. Like he says, that's quirk. But there's things, the example he gave is a bad example because that's rude. When the husband walks in their house and every night his wife is on the phone, that's rude. I'm sorry. Your wife should not be on the phone every night. Once in a while, it happens. But every night, the wife happens to be a social chatbot, and she's always talking to people. And every night, the husband walks in after a long day of work, or he comes in from Kolo, and she's on the phone. It's rude. I'm sorry. He's your husband. He's number one in your life. That's a quirk, right? And he's saying it's a quirk of the wife. The quirk of the husband that it bothers him. Of course it bothers him. She's doing something wrong. Anything that's something between you and your husband, it's insulting to one of the spouses, right? That's not a quirk, and you shouldn't be mavater. You should explain to your wife that it bothers you and she's wrong. And he says it's not important who's right or wrong. It is important. You have to know who's right and who's wrong. If something's really insulting to someone and you deserve better, more honor, you deserve your wife not to be on the phone every night, right? You have to address that because that's a need that you need. You're being insulted, right? To push it under the rug and say, let's be mavater. I always hear this phrase, a good marriage, people are mavater. No, you should never be mavater in a marriage. If it's something that bothers you and it's something that you need, and part of this is understanding what your needs are and what like we mentioned, and what the true roles in the house are, who is supposed to do what jobs. So at the end of the day, there is a right and wrong. Everything is right and wrong. There's always right and wrong in life, right? Sometimes, right, people make a mistake. The wife knows that it bothers her husband, and she gets a call. She tries really hard never to be on the phone. Once in a while, she's on the phone, and her husband's upset at her. Okay, she did something wrong, so she'll apologize. But it's important to know what's right and what's wrong in marriage. Don't say this is mavater, it's a quirk of his. No, she's wrong, the wife in this case. And certain cases, the husband's wrong in what he does, and if he's wrong, it's going to bother her. It's going to bother her, and if she's wrong, it's going to bother him. And the person who deserves, the respect that or the love that they're supposed to get and is not getting it, should stand up for their rights, not be mavater, and tell and communicate, know what they need, know that it's a lacking, that they need that, and communicate that they need that, and not be mavater. You have to know right from wrong, right? The whole source of the Torah is knowledge. If you don't know something, and if you can't figure out who's right and wrong, then go to a third person and ask them if it's really bothering you. Go to a third person. It doesn't have to be a rabbi. Go to a third person. Is this normal? Should I, of course it's rude, You go to most people and say it's rude for the wife to be on the phone every night that he's coming home. It's very rude, you know. So you have to know what's right and wrong in marriage. And when you figure out what's right and wrong, right? If it's something that's not related to you, she has her own, when she washes the dishes, she likes to wash the forks before the plates, that's fine. But if she's, doing something that's infringing, she's not washing the plates, she's washing the forks, and the plates are dirty, that's something that's going to bother you, right? That's her quirk. She doesn't like to wash plates. I don't know. But, the problem is that the plates are dirty and it bothers you, and you have a right to demand that she clean the plates. That's her job. She should be doing it. So don't say mavatar. It's our quirks. If it's between you, beino lebeino, we learn in Maseches Nedarim, the husband has the ability to abrogate a neder, right? That's beino lebeino, between her and him. Things that ruin their shalom bayis, right? He, even as her neder, she took a neder, he can abrogate that neder. He can block that neder because it disturbs the shalom bayis. If it's something which disturbs you or insults you as a spouse, you have the right, and you should speak up and tell the other spouse that what they're doing is wrong. And don't be a vater. That's just pushing it under the rug, and it's going to, get worse and swell in your heart. Eventually it's going to come out in anger in some other place and destroy your marriage in the future. So know what you need, know the roles in marriage, and don't be afraid, and know what's right and wrong. Know when someone's insulting you, when someone's not insulting you. All right, because it could be, right? Some people feel, she shouldn't be on the phone, right? As people take it to the extreme, she should be standing up for me when I get home, when I get into the house, So that's wrong. The husband doesn't deserve that type of honor, but he deserves that the wife shouldn't be on the phone every night when he comes home. He doesn't deserve that his wife should stand up for him. And, if he demands that, then he's wrong. And they should go to a third person and say, you're wrong. Torah doesn't say she's supposed to stand up for you. In fact, if she's standing up for you, you have bigger problems in your marriage. Anyway, that's the conclusion of today's chapter. We will start chapter 28, lesson 9, individuality and intimacy. We'll get back to intimacy in the next chapter. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. See you in the next one.